Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webcast. First up, I'd just like to say that we've been blown away with the response to the webcast. Obviously, feel like this is a very hot topic for many in our sector. And our topic today is the global rise of digital credentials and the future of, and really the opportunity for Australian vocational education and training. My name is Mark Washbourne. I'm the CEO of ReadyTech, and I'll introduce very shortly our guests and what we plan to cover today. Before I do that, very quickly, some housekeeping. First of all, we have an hour today, and we've allocated some time for a Q&A at the end of the session. So please use Zoom. At the foot of your screen, you should be able to send us questions. Please send them through at any time, and we'll attempt to get to as many of those as possible. Secondly, please join the conversation on social channels, Twitter and LinkedIn. Please use hashtag ReadyCred. We'd love to see engagement across social channels during and after the session today. Our team are pushing out content through the course of today. And lastly, you will receive an email following the session today with a recording of the webcast. We'll have an FAQ with any questions that we aren't able to answer. And lastly, we'll also send you a survey. We'd love to get your feedback on what you thought of the session today. So look, some key themes. What are we here to talk about? I think firstly, this is a topic that is very timely. I'm sure many of you out there will have seen the recent review of our AQF, our standards for qualification. And there was a really significant emphasis on the growth of micro and alternative credentials, and a review of really how they might be recognized and accredited in the future, how they might, for example, be used as credits towards a qualification. Lots of new models to work through, and highly related to those new models are digital credentials. Now micro and digital credentials are different things, of course, and we hope to demystify some of that today. But really, I think we see these variations of education as being highly enabled by digital credentials, and that's what we'd really like to explore today. So we want to explore digital credentials. We really want to understand it as a global movement. We think it's useful to picture them as a skills currency for the 21st century. And what we want to look at is what's happening globally, and then consider what this means for us locally here in Australia, and specifically for us here in vocational education and training. How do we ensure that we can thrive in what looks sure to be a real evolution in education and training over the next 5 to 10 years? Joining me, I'm very pleased to introduce two extraordinarily well-qualified people, and they are Jonathan Finkelstein and Brenda Perea from Credly, and they're based in the US. Just for some context, first of all, at ReadyTech, we are home to the most trusted student management systems in Australian VET, and they are VetTrack and JobReady, or JR+. And we've decided to partner with what we see as the leading digital credential technology provider globally, and that is Credly. And this will allow our customers to issue badges directly from our student management systems. So first of all, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the founder and the CEO of Credly, Jonathan Finkelstein. Hello, Jonathan. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining.
Mark, it's good to see you. Good morning, and hello to all of our colleagues who are joining us today. It's terrific to be part of this conversation.
Fabulous. Can I first of all ask you where you are and what time it is there?
That is an excellent question. I am in Credly's Minneapolis office today. It is 5 p.m. local time, the day before your yesterday. And I'm usually based in our New York office. So it's also a 1 hour shift in time zone for me today.
Oh, fantastic. Now, it does sound you're a bit behind us, but if you work hard, you might be able to catch up.
I'm working on it, Mark. It's hard to keep up with you guys, I gotta say.
So our second guest is Brenda Perea. Look, Brenda has been a pioneer of digital credentials in the equivalent of vocational education and training in the US. Brenda drove a very large program of adoption at the Colorado Community College, and these community colleges are really providers very similar to those of people that are joining us today in VET. So welcome, Brenda.
Thank you so much, Mark.
And I'm correct in saying that you were part of the equivalent of vocational education and training in the US, Brenda, right?
Correct. I came from Colorado Community College System, which was 14 independently accredited two-year colleges that specialized in vocational education, as well as 2-year associate degrees in humanities.
Fantastic. Look, we really look forward to you sharing some of the stories from that college and also from others around the world. So let's get into that discussion. Very quick agenda. This is what we're going to talk to these experts about today. But first of all, we're going to look at the fundamentals, the absolute nuts and bolts. What is a digital credential? We're going to also look at the global context, you know, and why we believe the time is right now for the adoption of digital credentials in Australia. We're going to look at the application of all of this specifically to Australian vet, but also the benefits to education providers, to learners here in Australia, as well as employers, you know, the whole system that we have here in Australia. And also we're going to lean on our experts at Credly on how you can get started, how you might think about adopting and implementing digital credentials, and all of that in time for some Q&A at the end. So we've got just under an hour, so let's crack on. And look, the first question I'd like to pose is to Jonathan. I think you're probably the best person to ask this globally, Jonathan, if I may. And the question is, what is a digital credential?
It's a good place to start, Mark. And it's actually, I think, a lot simpler than it may sound. It's really, when you think about it, it's the modern version of that paper certificate that used to hang behind you in your office, but with so many more benefits and affordances. Just as the whole the whole world has gone digital, our learning has moved to online courses, our assessments have moved to be tech enabled. So too should the outcomes be digital in nature. And so a digital credential is a verified way of proving what it is that somebody knows or can do. It's rich with data in a way that a paper certificate could never be. It's accessible in all different kinds of environments, contexts, and it can work on behalf of the person who earned it, even when they're not sitting in that room and welcoming you into their office and pointing to that document in the frame behind them. So it really can help tell the full and complete story of somebody's skills and abilities.
Sorry, of course, I think importantly, they are verifiable, right?
Sorry? Oh, we're on one of those kind of planes? Okay, perfect.
And I think we have one person who's just I don't know if we have a mute button there, but we can try. Maybe Pat can use her audio. Yes, that's right. They are verifiable. That means they're independently verifiable. You can actually trust and understand that when somebody presents this digital credential, that its provenance is proven. The organization that stands behind it is really the organization that actually can attest to their skills. And it actually, I think, really increases the efficiency and the utility of all that of that outcome, because somebody can actually carry it with them. They can present it on their mobile device. They can use it when applying for jobs or for ongoing learning opportunities. And they don't need to go ahead and retrace their steps and go connect a whole handful and host of players who played a role in assessing their learning. They've got a single place and a single way with independently verified outcomes that they possess and that they can carry with them into each new setting that they walk into.
Okay, that's really great explanation. Thanks. And I think, of course, micro and digital credentials are different, and I think micro credentials is not necessarily new. You know, our vet qualifications are made up of many small units of learning. But this is a big topic right now, and digital credentials are, of course, connected to these, and in some ways an enabler of new ways of learning. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of thinking about it. You know, a digital credential, while represents just a brief moment in time, right? It's this artifact. I like to think of it as
We lost them both. Sorry, everyone. I think we might have lost Jonathan, which is, oh.
qualification or a degree. Because it's that flexible and can represent outcomes of all different kinds of granularity, it's really the atoms from which larger molecules and entities can be created.
I think I'd like to sort of move now on to the global context and why now for digital credentials. So can you maybe share a little bit about, the development and the journey of digital credentials so far? I called it a global movement at the top. Is it right to think of it in that way?
Yeah, in terms of the thinking about the kind of global movement that this really represents, Mark, absolutely. I think when I think about where we started this journey collectively as a group of individuals and organizations that really care about doing better by making sure that the investments people make in their learning and the time they spend, the money they spend, the energy they exert to develop new skills, how do we make sure that all that work actually gets recognized and put to use? It's really become a movement, and it is larger than any one organization, any one technology. It's even becoming larger than any one technical standard. In order to tell that complete story, you really need to have all groups kind of aligning on a common way of verifying and recording skills. This is something that we see from associations, we see from colleges, universities, those in the vocational sector. We also see businesses, global businesses, who have been adopting this as a common way of telling the full story of what their people can do, but also projecting to the world what it is that they value, because credentials in digital form say as much about what somebody has accomplished as it does about the organizations that issue those credentials. It's a way of projecting your values, what you care about, and what you are as an organization are uniquely in a position to assess, and what kinds of standards do you set as an organization about what people should care about, what kinds of achievements matter in today's world. And skills know no boundaries. We're in a global environment in which people are looking everywhere to find people with just the right skills they need for the kinds of projects and programs. We know that we're approaching a world in which nearly half of the working population is part of a gig or freelance economy. People need to be and operate as an HR department of one when they go out into the world. Their credentials are a way of verifying what they bring into every new situation, and that has global ramifications.
And would you mind sharing a bit about Credly, a bit more about Credly, in terms of, for example, just really interested to know how many badges you've issued so far, and who have been the biggest issuers of badges around the world?
Of course. So a little bit about Credly as an organization. We started, the company formed in 2012. We're actually just past our 7-year anniversary by a couple of days. Although we've been working on this problem for a couple of years before we officially founded the organization. My colleagues and I have been working in workforce education, workforce development, education for most of our professional lives. And one of the things that we realized was, with all the innovation that was going into how do you scale up the ability to do quality, immersive, authentic learning that affects people's professional careers, how do you do that at scale? There was virtually no attention being paid to how you actually recognize the outcomes of those programs. And so when we started Credly in 2012, it was with the notion that this was a specialized area that deserved focus. It needed to embrace open standards as well. This was going to be a movement that many groups would need to connect to and be part of. We were not trying to recreate the learning management arena or the assessment world or the world of AR and VR and authentic performance reviews, but the data for all the things that make up what somebody's human capital represents, it resides in lots of different places. So the approach that we took was to say, let's try to unlock the value of that learning and of those assessments and bring them forward. When we first started, and brought the platform to market in 2013. We thought maybe we'd get a few dozen organizations that would be ready to start, and quickly grew to thousands of organizations who really wanted to be part of this movement. Today, we have well over 25 million credentials under management. They've been earned by individuals in 195 countries. We are, every second that I'm speaking, and this is actually a slightly out of date, this number has grown since we made the slide, but a credential is being issued or checked or shared by individuals. So the pace of utility of these credentials, we're talking about hundreds of millions of opportunities being created by these credentials. It's real and it's quite global.
Yeah. Look, congratulations on the progress so far. I think the numbers are very exciting. And I think it seems to me that, in a world of sort of fast changing skills and new and emerging needs of employers, this is probably more than anything created a need for this type of skills recognition, and probably linked as well to the trend of lifelong learning. Is that also the right way to think about maybe some of the reasons why it's taken off the last few years?
Yeah, there are, I think, a lot of global trends that both apply directly to learning and to human capital arena more broadly, that are all kind of pointing towards the need to have a trusted way, a portable way, and a data-rich approach to reporting on people's skills. And just to cite a couple, we know that when individuals today are seeking their first job or their third job or their seventh job, what people care about is they're not just looking for a place to work, they're looking for a place to learn. This means that not only are educational institutions in the business of learning, but businesses are in the business of learning. And whereas academic institutions have long had transcripts and diplomas and certificates to offer, businesses haven't had any kind of consistent way of doing that. And so businesses are looking to recognize learning as a way of projecting that they're a great place to work, as well as a great place to learn, as a way of letting their customers know that their people have the most up-to-date skills and are ready to do the projects and work that those customers expect of them. And so a few years ago, when we were first really pushing this movement forward, I used to get asked by colleges and universities, well, if we issue a badge or a digital credential, will employers care about it? And it turns out today we have more credentials being issued by employers than there are degrees being issued every year. So we now have both sides of this talent marketplace caring about outcomes in a consistent way. Another thing that we see is that engaging both learners and engaging employees is a top priority for people who lead organizations. 89% of HR professionals say that having a recognition system at work improves not only the employee experience, but helps organizations be more productive. And so you're seeing, as employers care more about recognizing outcomes and skills through credentials, that helps lift the tide for academic institutions, who now get to answer that question I mentioned a few moments ago, which is, yeah, employers do care about skills and credentials. In fact, they expect it to be done that way on the job, and it makes it easier for those pathways from academic and training programs and vocational programs to more closely align with what employers are doing. And then just one or two other quick things I would point out. None of us, of course, would misrepresent our own skills on our resumes or our CVs or our job applications. But the fact of the matter is, 85% of employers have said that they have found a lie or a misrepresentation on a job application or a resume. That calls into question the integrity of all of us if even a few people are gaming the system. And I think, honestly, most people don't even intend to misrepresent their skills. They're just not given the language and the sanctioned way of representing what they know and they can do. And it behooves all of us as groups that see people in action, that can assess their skills, to give them and empower them with a verified artifact that lets them, in a more trusted way, tell the story of what we know that they're able to do. And they're doing this against the backdrop of a hiring community that is looking to hire based on skills. They know that they can reduce the cost to hire someone by about 70% and get them into productivity 50% faster when they can actually know what kind of skills someone has walking in the door. So a training provider, a vocational institution that actually delivers verified proof, not just of completion of an overall program, but of individual skills, is arming the individuals they serve to be much more valued and much more quickly by the workforce they're trying to usher them into or upwards within.
Look, everything just makes a ton of sense. And maybe I'd just like to ask Brenda, we hear a lot in Australia about the skills gap. And I think that it seems to me that in the US and other parts of the world, this is a very similar narrative. And I've heard this technology, digital credentials, sort of talked about as an opportunity for a better communication tool between providers and learners as well as employers. Is that something you can comment on?
Oh, absolutely. If we look at digital credentials, digital badges as a wrapper for all the metadata that is contained in knowledge, skills, and abilities, it totally makes sense. Personally, I was in the Colorado Community College system, our 2-year system. In 2012, our state of Colorado had 15,000 unfilled advanced manufacturing jobs. And each year it was compounding. So it was 15,000 in 2012, 30,000 in 2013. And our governor said, there's a problem and we need to fix that problem. And he directed the community college system to fix the problem, right? And what it wasn't that our 2-year colleges or our 4-year colleges weren't graduating people with degrees, but it was a lack of transparency of the skills that everyone in the state actually had that allowed them to fill those massive unfilled advanced manufacturing jobs, right? It was a matter of transparency, communication, and capacity, and it needed to be fixed. So some of the problems we were addressing in the skills gap was truly about a communications gap. We had no idea how to communicate between academic and employers. That set of skills were not actually being transparent to employers, and our students didn't understand how to communicate to those employers what skill sets they had in terms and language that those employers would understand. So it was truly about a skills gap. For instance, if we take the industry sector of advanced manufacturing in Colorado, we had 15,000 unfilled advanced manufacturing jobs. And it was truly about the fact that there were open positions. We had a workforce, but the workforce was not connecting to those open positions. And so what really happened when we introduced digital badges is the knowledge, skills, and abilities contained in the metadata of those digital badges allowed both the student to communicate not only what they knew, but the skills they had and the performance levels to employers who were seeking those exact same skills and performance levels.
It's a really great example. And I think sort of digging deeper into that application to Australian vocational education and training, can you share with us some other real life boots on the ground examples of application in vocational education and training?
Absolutely. So there's 2 different examples I'd like to present to you. One is we have a large aerospace manufacturer that is global in Colorado, but we know that shelf life of skills from a college degree is about 3 years. But this employer is hiring people so that they maintain their employment with this aerospace engineering firm for 34 years. And during that 34 years, if you think the shelf life of their degree is only 3 years, they need to continually reskill, retool, and evaluate how those employees are doing. And they project that those employees will go circus through 3 to 7 different job projects. And they have different skills that are not necessarily based on their terminal degree, right? So when you are entering into this company, you might do X and Y projects, but by the time you're 7 years in, 14 years in, you need a whole different skill set. So those are constant reskilling of jobs and skill sets that they actually needed reskilling for. And so it was also, we introduced digital badges to that workforce to actually effectively manage their talent. For instance, there was a whole group of aerospace engineers that were working on the Mars rover. Those aerospace engineers had very high degrees, terminal degrees, but what was found is that when we were trying to cycle them off of the Mars rover program, they had no clue other than the fact that they were astrophysicist degrees. What we actually found out was some of these astrophysicists had very specific knowledge, such as water in zero gravity. When we actually started digital badging, lining out the digital badges to actually capture those skill sets and those abilities, it found out that across Lockheed Martin, there was only 10 of them that actually had experience in zero gravity. So they were able to actually move those zero gravity specialists on to other projects, even though that whole team all had astrophysicist degrees. That's a really super high level. Doesn't necessarily apply to VOTech, but it shows you that even those with advanced degrees need some type of capture of skills and abilities they've developed on the job. If we bring it down home a little bit further, let's talk about advanced manufacturing and engineering graphics. To tell you the truth, in Colorado in 2012, there was no digital badges ever being actually issued in Colorado. So we actually had to build the ecosystem of digital badges. I put on approximately 1,500 miles on my Subaru every single month, going out and talking to economic development boards, mayors, city councils, K through 12 systems, 2-year systems, post-secondary institutions, talking to them about the power of digital credentials, digital badges, and how they could actually communicate skills, abilities to employers, as well as other educator fields, right? So I spent 3 years traveling around the state, not only developing the ecosystem, but actually developing digital badges for the Colorado community system, which is, of course, 14 independently accredited colleges, all working in the VOTech space, all doing their own thing. And we needed one common language, one common digital badge that actually signaled to employers that these people could actually do these, have this knowledge, do these skills, and fill these jobs, right? So it was interesting. About the spring of 2017, I received a cold email from an architectural firm in Denver, Colorado. It was Vertical Arts. And they said, you know what? I've ignored you every time you showed up at the mayor's council, city council, and the economic development boards, because what you were talking about didn't apply to our firm, because we hire architects. We need architects to complete our jobs. But you know what, Brenda, I've had actually 3 positions open for the last 6 months that is impacting our ability to actually complete an international design job. And it was funny because it was just like, okay, this guy has actually ignored me when I've talked about skills, abilities captured in digital badges. But now he's coming to me asking me, how do I fill these jobs? And so when I started talking to him, he of course gave me the job description. And the job description was, you must have an architectural degree, right? And I said, well, okay, that's a gatekeeper. Let's talk about the skills you need to fill these 3 positions for this international design job. And he started talking about the actual skills, not the degrees, but the skills that were needed. And I said, okay, it sounds like, and if you go on our website and look at the Rivet software engineering badge, tell me if those are the same skills you've just articulated to me, right? And he goes, oh my God, I've totally ignored you for 3 years. These are the exact skills I need. We are not only not communicating what we're needing in skill sets, but we're actually preventing highly qualified applicants from applying for our jobs because we're using the wrong language, right? So I said, okay, we're totally on the same page now. Thank you for not ignoring me for 3 years. I will send you a list of 54 students who have actually earned this badge in the last semester. Let me know how it goes, right? And so I go ahead and call him back 2 weeks later, and I was gonna say, you know, hey, Randy, how's it going? And he was just like, and he starts laughing at me, and nothing hurts an educator's heart more than having somebody laugh at them. And it's just like, what is going on? So I said, you know, hey, Randy, what's going on? He goes, I had meant to call you, but it's such a funny thing that you called, because off of that list of 54 students, we were able to hire to fill those 3 open positions that had been open for 6 months within 72 hours, because the badge captured the exact skill set we needed to complete the job. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. He goes, you know what? I shouldn't have ignored you, because you were providing the actual communication between skills and abilities that we were looking for. So badges do actually provide a communication so that the student knows what they're talking about, the employers know what they're talking about, and it all comes together very, very well. And one of the other things that what I wanted to talk about is the fact that with digital badges, the metadata within it is all talking and referenced in industry-specific language. So it actually empowers both the learner-earner, the consumer of that badge, and the issuer, those institutions who are actually issuing those badges, to all talk about the exact same skills in the exact same way.
I think like the example of Randy, and I'd love to meet Randy. And I think that's such a great example of, you know, the shift maybe towards hiring based on skills rather than, you know, job, career, or resume or degrees. And, you know, it really seems to me that vocational education and training providers are maybe best positioned to sort of capitalize on this trend towards working with employers in this way. It's a comment from either of you would be great.
So one of the things I actually wanted to contribute to is that not only, okay, so we shine the light on this whole thing in Colorado, and it's basically taken over the whole nation. But one of the things I wanted to actually convey to the VOTEC area is that badges actually complement our existing programs and degrees. They don't necessarily supplant it, and it provides multiple on-ramps and off-ramps to our programs. So it really does enhance what we are doing, but it enhances it to the point where all outsiders understand what we're doing.
So if I'm a provider, for example, you know, of larger, you know, multi-year qualifications, can I think about using digital credentials maybe as motivators through that longer course, or as maybe as complementary or alternative forms of training?
I would say absolutely. You know, I think there's this fallacy that we need to help the world get over when it comes to training and academic institutions, which is that that there's only value if something has been completed in its totality. You know, here in the United States, we have an incredibly terrible student debt crisis and problem, where I think it's compounded by the fact that you have people who have completed 3/4 of the progress towards a degree or a certificate, have learned 3/4 of the skills and the competencies, have incurred 3/4 of the debt, and yet have 0 to show for it. Why can't we credential in real time? Why can we not give people the resume-worthy certification or credential for the skills as they develop them? We're finding with organizations that recognizing in a more granular level on the way to the completion of a program actually engages learners. It makes them more likely to complete the programs. The fears of people getting just the things they need and then disappearing from the program have not proved to be founded. The converse is true, that people are more engaged in their learning, more likely to take the next step. We've been doing a lot of work with our partners. What we hear from organizations that issue credentials for sub-skills or competencies within larger programs is that they become these check-in points where you get to not just say good job, but you get to give them the language of how to communicate in the way that Brenda was talking about, this being a communications problem. Just as you've done all that work assessing the skills, putting them through a course, program of study, an internship, an apprenticeship, you cap that particular segment off with an official, portable, sanctioned way of talking about those skills. It's a great part of the learning process too, to be able to go, wait a minute, that's really valuable. And by the way, the other thing that helps that be a good capstone for each particular part of the pathway is it can be connected to real-time labor market data. We can actually show learners on the platform when they look at a credential based on the skills and competencies, hey, here are the 260 jobs that are now available to people with your skills. But by the way, did you know that they're often accompanied by these 7 other skills, which are available in the next 3 badges that you're about to earn as you complete the program? Being able to show people the delta between what they have and the skills they will acquire as part of your programs also shows how the number of opportunities and the type of opportunities change in real time as you get credentialed in real time. It's a powerful way of scaffolding people's learning.
Right, and if you take the example of 2014, 2015, Colorado had welders going through our 2-year program. And here in the United States, we have the American Welding Society has an actual standard. And so all of our colleges are teaching to this standard at different points within the curriculum. But like each course is actually documented on a transcript, but it's only until you complete the 2-year program that you get actually AWS certified, right? You take the test and get certified. 2014, 2015, the North Dakota oil fields, which is 3 states away, actually became very, very hot and were in demand for high pressure welders, right? So we had recruiters from North Dakota, the state of North Dakota, waiting outside our community colleges for the 6-week mark in most of our welding courses to actually hire those students away to North Dakota to actually go get very lucrative jobs in high pressure welding and oil and gas production. Well, as normally in oil and gas production happens in the United States, we actually had a crash in that production. And so all of our welders, Colorado welders that were in the community college system, went up to North Dakota. They did 18 months there. The actual field crashed. And so they all came back to Colorado. What was happening is those students who left before they actually completed a course ended up having to repeat that course that they started with because there was no documentation or no capturing of what skills they actually left the educational program with. However, those students who actually had earned digital badges along either an apprenticeship pathway or within Pueblo Community College, who had actually created a competency-based educational program with welding badges, we were able to actually advance them inside their exact same program at the exact same point what they left. And so not only did those digital badges provide a record of performance and abilities, but it also captured where they were within a program. So it provided them an entry point back into the educational program to actually complete their degree completion. And you think about it, it's not only as a degree completion as an enhancement, but it actually provides persistence through an actual program. Those that had to restart the whole program were very discouraged, but those who had earned digital badges along the way, they already had assets that they could actually apply to a degree completion program.
Sure, the example is very, very familiar to providers here as well. I think just a bit closer to home, I'd love to hear, obviously there's been some early adopters here in Australia. Just love to hear some success stories from what's happening in our own country. I know, for example, our RMIT has been working with Credly for some time. Is anything you can share around some of the local success stories?
Sure, happy to, Mark. Yeah, our RMIT's work is, I think, a really great example, and it should be very inspirational to folks around the world. I think one of the things that RMIT has done that is a good indicator for successful digital badge or credential programs is that they've taken a holistic and systemic approach to thinking about credentials. They looked across all of their offerings, their degree programs, their certificates, internships, the kinds of programs for incoming new students and returning students, and essentially created a currency that they call RMIT Creds that help unify all of their programming. So people can enter at any different point in their life, pre or during their professional life, and be able to better understand how the different offerings at RMIT might contribute to their goals, their career goals, their learning goals. And so you'll see things, for example, RMIT Creds that have endorsements of employers who actually advocate for the program in much the way that Brenda was talking about. The architecture firms looking for particular outcomes and being able to say, yeah, if somebody actually had that credential, I would hire them. These are businesses, employers who are looking at the curriculum, looking at the badge that represents someone who's completed that curriculum, and then saying, yeah, we stand behind that. That represents the kinds of skills and people that we would and do hire. So you'll see models around building the value and the validity of the currency by showing that it's actually accepted and valued by local and regional businesses. But I do think that we see this in academic institutions where there is a cross-departmental or a cross-curricular approach, as well as in businesses who are issuing credentials from one department and then saying, you know what, this is going to represent the strategic goals of the company, and we want all of our employees to be upskilled to a certain point, and we're going to mint this currency in a way that everyone understands what it means. Those kinds of, if I were to create my own monopoly money or mark bucks and try to spend them in a 3-block radius, I might be able to convince people to accept them by going door to door. But if I can get them accepted across the whole city and across all of Melbourne or Australia or the world at large, obviously there's a lot more value. And I think thinking about these do start at home, and they do often work best when you at least aspire to a holistic approach. Don't let this frighten you, though, from thinking that you have to start that way. Many programs start by identifying the needs within a given program, a given and known audience, seeing success with it, and then aspiring to and finding connections and other ways to bridge the gap. You don't need to mint the dimes and the nickels and the quarters and the dollar bills using our U.S. currency names all at once. You can start with the denominations you're ready to issue and build from there.
Yeah. I really think that opportunity is very compelling. So when providers are thinking about some of the benefits, and we'll talk get onto the adoption lastly, but providers can think about this as a way to better motivate students. That could increase completions. We understand also there's some evidence that it leads to stronger repeat business or coming back for further courses, easier recognition by employers. So can you sort of maybe expand a bit more on how providers might think about the fuller benefits?
Yeah, I think there's probably a top 3 to 5 set of business metrics that learning organizations, all organizations think about when they're trying to understand how best to resource and plan and make this a reality. They might re-rank themselves depending on the organization and what matters most. One of the dimensions, and I'm not sharing these in any particular order, but I often played this down because I didn't want to minimize the value of the skills and the sense of empowerment that comes with credentials. But it turns out that marketing is a big deal. That all of us are operating in a very busy and crowded world in which we need to make sure that we help, that we're marketing our programs to the people best suited to benefit from them, and that the people who complete our programs are marketing themselves in a crowded labor market. And so one measure of ROI that organizations look at is the marketing benefit that comes from having a portable, visual, credible representation of the outcomes, whether it's course completion, program completion, or individual skills. We see organizations measure the marketing value often in looking at the visibility of their programs, the number of people who are learning about their training programs from others who've completed it. Customers will sometimes look at the amount of brand impressions, ad impressions. If they were to take out Google ads and LinkedIn ads to promote their training programs, their courses, their degree programs, what would it cost them to do that versus what happens when the people who completed those programs are sharing them on their own out on social media. Turns out we have customers who are generating upwards of $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 US per month in free social media advertising because they are issuing credentials that people really care about, and people are clicking through to say, hey, how do I learn more about this program? So marketing value. One of the other common metrics and business metrics that we hear about are completion rates. Can we actually move the needle on the number of people completing our courses, completing our programs? One example, and we've seen similar examples from other across the board, but one well-documented example is our colleagues at IBM. They offer open, free courses, MOOCs, as well as courses for their own employees, as well as courses in partnerships with universities. And they have found that when they add a badge as recognition for their courses, their completions on those courses go up 694%. In other words, 7 times more people completing programs that actually have recognition at the end. So completion is a real thing. Engagement rates. Are people actually sticking with it, even if you're not issuing a badge for individual skills? If the course or the program has verifiable recognition, do people take more actions? Are they more likely to complete the assessments? And yes, we're seeing greater increase in engagement. There are also more qualitative measures that come in the form of surveys. We have groups that have asked their learners, do you feel more closely connected to our institution? Are you more likely to take other courses from us? Are you likely to recommend our programs to others? And the courses that include ongoing recognition are more likely to score higher in terms of all of those measures. So those are just a few, but I think it's important to note that every organization is different and is trying to pull the different levers that they have to see the outcomes they want for student and learner success. And sometimes that is very business focused on, how do we get more marketing eyeballs our way because we know we've got great programs. Marketing isn't just about getting more people into your programs. It's also about letting people know that you have credible programs and they should hire your people. Brand equity and brand building around your programs is at least as much about making sure the consumers of the credentials you issue know to value your learners and your students and those you train. So those are just a few examples, Mark.
Yep, no, fantastic. And before we get into the Q&A, I think I'm sure that many providers out there find those benefits very compelling. I think many providers will probably be thinking, where should I start? What's a good place to start? I mean, Brenda, obviously did a lot of that in Colorado. So what could you share in terms of, top tips for how to think about first getting started?
So one of the top tips is to think about the employer's needs first, like go out to the employers and figure out where is the communications gap, where is the perceived skill gap, and start working on those first. Like I wanted to talk to a quick segment on non-credit. We have both credit and non-credit in Colorado Community College System. 2013, 3D printing really took off. And what we found was the fact that 3D printing, while in its infancy, we were only having students take it. Once the students started showing their badges out, we had Colorado employers who were asking our institutions to do you actually have courses or employee training, industry training on metal manufacturing in 3D printing, in food grade 3D printing. So it was the fact that there was an unknown, unmet employer need out there that actually surfaced more badges for us and actually drove more enrollment in our program. So one of them is think about where the employer needs are, surface those skill sets first, and then backward design those wants, those skills that employers are wanting into your existing programs. They've got to be there. It's not like we're incompetent in higher education when we're building programs. We're not just making things up. We actually look at what's going on there, but it might not be transparent. So look first at those skills and abilities your employers are actually looking for and see if they're in your existing programs and badge those first. Then actually go out and actually talk to employers and find out what could you actually add to enhance your current programs or degrees, and actually work on those badges as well.
And Mark, if I may just add one quick note to this. I don't disagree with anything that Brenda just shared, of course. But I would also say that one place that you can also start is look at where you're already. You know that you've got programs where there is a certificate, where there is a record of completion. Those are can be a really great place to start. They can create a foundation from which to launch new programs. And other outcomes that you're going to recognize. So take all of your existing certificate programs, apprenticeships, internships, things that you might have otherwise issued on paper or acknowledged in some other way. We have many organizations that will do what we sometimes call a historical or retroactive issuing. Go back a couple of years and actually invite alumni or people who did some program but didn't necessarily complete all of the ones you offer, and offer them the digital version of their credential. It's a great way to stay engaged with the community that you've already served and provide a air cover, if you will, for all the new programs and things you'll do.
Fantastic. So really good advice. I think we'll get into the Q&A, and we have got a ton of questions, so I'm just being helped here to pick through a couple. First one is thanks for the question, Ben. If we are issuing certificates through our regulatory requirement, can we also issue a digital credential? And I don't expect you to understand the Australian compliance requirements, but if you are required to issue a certificate, can you also issue, or should you also issue, a digital credential?
I think this is about giving. You want to make the outcome as valuable and as useful to the person who earned it. This is a great way of providing more ways for someone to put their license and credential to use. One good example, we're working with our friends and partners in the UK. City and Guilds is the largest vocational licensing body in the UK and based in London. And they're in the process of moving what are millions of government regulated licenses to their digital format. To the extent that there are places that still require paper, those can coexist with a digital credential. I think we're doing our learners, our earners, a much greater service when we allow that credential to act on their behalf in a lot more ways than that piece of paper could or would.
Okay, thanks for that, Jonathan. Another question is, how can I best analyze the ROI, return on investment, of my digital credentialing program? It's quite a broad question.
So that's a good question. I think in your particular case, I would love to know more about your program, and I think it can be very contextual. When I was citing some of the measures that people use to measure the ROI of their programs, it can vary from program to program. But if let's assume you hadn't yet launched your program, one of the things I would suggest is to identify how you will measure success. What are the 1, 2, or 3 key problems you are trying to solve, and then identify how it is you're going to measure them. You will find with digital credentials that they offer a whole new array of data to bring to understanding and bringing insights to business problems, to learning problems, we're not accustomed to actually having data on. How do people go out and use their credentials? How do we keep in touch with and establish longer term relationships, lifelong relationships with individuals when we have new programs we offer, when there are new regulations or a new environment within the field that you've helped upskill them within? How do we offer up new pathways that might help someone top off their skills? We work with a group called the AICPA, the Association of International Chartered Public Accountants. This is a group that, when it comes to accounting, this is a trade that's constantly undergoing new regulatory changes, new technical skills required. And so how do we think about measuring the success by building up a growing portfolio of skills to help serve people for a lifetime, not just for a single moment in their life? So in any event, I would identify what are the how would you measure success, and then work backwards and make sure that you're building the program in a way that actually moves the needle on it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. There's a question for Brenda, I think, here. And Brenda, there was a lot of questions about Colorado. So I think you've pushed hot buttons here, and may have to fly you out here and come and talk to some of the providers directly. But yeah, look, the question is, did employers in Colorado start sending their employees back into education to get badged new skills? And did this build the college business? Question from David.
Absolutely. It was interesting because, of course, we built the digital badges for our students, right? Giving our students the benefit or the enhancement to actually go out and find jobs. So one of the very first courses that we actually delivered digital badges in were technical math for industry. And it was interesting. We ran this course, which was an open MOOC for 10 quarters. The first quarters were not used with digital badges. The last 6 quarters were with digital badges. We served about 7,000 students. We found not only did the students persist through difficult materials through that, but towards the last 4 quarters, I started actually looking at the emails of the students who were actually signing up for very particular skill sets that were going to be badged by a digital badge. And I found out the majority of those students who were enrolling were actually had emails from our employers. So when I started calling back the employers, they were like, yes, we're sending our employees to your technical math for industry to earn very specific badges so that we can either retain them, reskill them, or upskill them into new positions. So it was interesting that our employers started driving business to our technical math courses for very specific badges. It wasn't that they wanted them to complete the course, they wanted them to get mastery over ratio, proportions, and percents, which translated into geometric dimensioning and tolerances on their scale. We also actually had, several of our colleges actually had drone courses. And they were using drone courses, but what ended up happening is because of the technology and the companies that were actually using drones in Colorado for agribusiness, for all these, for wildlife counts and all these other things, because of the sensors on the drones, it actually, we had a component that students could, in our drone, our FAA licensed drone courses, that students could take data analysts, data analytics, data visualization, and some other data issues with the sensors that were actually picking up data from the drones. And we ended up finding out that while our students were keen on data analyst and data visualization, they were more interested in, we all have to know, they were more interested in actually flying drones than actually doing the data analysis. But our employers in Southern Colorado, as well as Northern Colorado, were actually signing up their employees for those data analytics and data visualization badges because they had very specific needs that they needed. And we were supplying the needs that they needed for those employers to actually have their employees earn those badges.
Thanks for that one, Brenda. Look, one more question because I think we're pushing right up to the hour now. And I think this is a great question. And I think about this, I'm sure many providers do. Have you seen commercial success in VocEd in breaking macro learning programs into smaller learning pieces with digital badges? I think that's probably, obviously, I think a lot of providers think that there is some disruptive force happening maybe with smaller pieces of learning that, that might have an impact on the overall business.
You want to take that one, Brenda?
Sure. I have to tell you, we did both in Colorado Community College System. It wasn't a one or other. We did both. We not only did, we badged inside our macro programs, as well as we had programs that we actually created where, oh, you know what? We've got a badge 1, a badge 2, a badge 3, and it looks like there's a whole demand for this, and let's build a whole program around what these badges are. So we actually had both instances inside Colorado Community College System. And to tell you the truth, you know, that is happening across the United States. It's not just in Colorado, it's happening across the United States.
I'd like to ask one really quick one, which is part of our AQF review is really trying to understand if smaller pieces of learning can be accredited or should be accredited, you know, micro-credentials in our system. So I just wondered if, Jonathan, if you can share something on the global view of what is going on around the world in terms of that sort of that accreditation in frameworks such as ours.
Yeah, I mean, this is where because you've gone digital, you have so many different flavors of this that you can choose from, both in terms of dealing with the regulatory requirements in which you're operating, but also, you know, really trying to be creative and entrepreneurial about impact.
You're still going.
To quality and validity is the ability to really have third-party organizations sign on to a credential. I was talking a little bit earlier about some of the endorsements that our MIT is doing. This is a place, for example, here in the United States, we have a group called the American Council on Education. They actually review workforce learning for its equivalence to college credit. So even though they are not an accreditor, nor are they a registrar of a single institution, they help act as the Rosetta Stone, and will say that the course you took while working at Walt Disney World and completing a customer service training, well, that's worth 3 credits towards a bachelor's degree in business. And that attestation, that accreditation, becomes part of the credential, and it travels with it. So groups that are actually looking to understand how to value it can do so. It can travel with a range of data, endorsements, college credit recommendations, and other data that we're not typically accustomed to seeing printed on a transcript or on a certificate. And it's dynamic. Those things can expire or change when the accreditation requirements change. So I think, in short, we're seeing a lot of creativity and that the technology is enabling.
Fantastic. So look, we have a heap more questions. I think we're going to have to go back with an FAQ to everyone. So look, please just, if everyone stick around for another 60 seconds, just before we finish up, just a quick look at what's next. As I said at the top, we've formed a partnership with Credly here at ReadyTech, and our customers will be able to issue digital credentials directly from our systems. That's via VetTrack or JR+. Very exciting for us to bring this innovation to our clients. We really wanted to be the first student management systems to market with this in Australia, and we believe we've done that. So if you'd like to hear more following today and are interested to learn more, we've just launched a mini site full of more information on digital credentials. The address you can see on the screen. You can also email us at ReadyTech. ReadyTech's partnership with Credly will bring a range of benefits and incentives designed to help our clients really unlock the value from their programs with digital credentials. And so when you contact us, we'll be available to consult about design and implementation, also talk you through pricing. Just really, I think it's really important to note, in our view, this is very cost-effective piece of addition technology and value to your students. And not only that, I think we're very, very fortunate here to be supported by local credentials experts in Veritas who represent Credly in Asia Pacific. They can also help with program design and implementation. If you're not a ReadyTech client, please contact us as well. We'll certainly be able to talk to you about adoption of Credly. And lastly, in coming weeks, everyone who attended today is going to receive a ReadyTech Digital Credentials Playbook, which is in the final stages of being produced. It's really, again, aimed at helping you to think through design, adoption, and implementation. We have some vet experts actually helping with that with us here in Australia. So look, I'd just like to finally thank Jonathan and Brenda from Credly. Fascinating, I think really inspiring insights. You've been very generous with your time. I feel very privileged to have talked to you today. So thank you very much indeed.
And Mark, thank you, and thanks to everyone who joined us. We're really excited about our partnership, and really pleased with how much thoughtfulness you've brought to what you're bringing out to your partners. I think it's going to have a huge impact in Australia and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. So look, to everyone in the audience, thanks so much for attending. You will receive a copy of this webcast. Very exciting times, I think, for new models of learning. I hope you feel better informed, and just know that we are here and ready to help you, support you on your digital credentials journey. So thanks everyone for joining.
Awesome. Have a great night.
Thanks, Jonathan.